do some quick introductions about me. My name is Abasa Phillips. I'm based in Tokyo. I've been in Tokyo for a long time. Been in crypto for a long time too. And just enjoying myself at Beyond Blocks. And we're here to talk about advisors. And I'll let you guys first introduce yourselves.
Okay. Pleasure to meet everybody. My name is Alon. I'm from First Digital Asset Group. We provide financial services for crypto and non-crypto related businesses, basically bridging the gap between those two worlds. So financial institutions on one side, family offices, traditional, and crypto companies, blockchain companies on the other side. Liquidity provision, custody, enterprise wallet, asset management, research, some algo trading. That's basically what we do. And we don't do advisory, but we do give a lot of advice.
Nice. Where are you based?
I'm based in Tel Aviv. We're incorporated in Europe, in Gibraltar, Switzerland, UK, and also operating globally, basically.
Great. All right, Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan Hott, and I'm a partner of Ledger Capital. Ledger Capital is a digital asset investment firm as well as investment bank. So I wear two hats. I'm also the founder, CEO of a tokenized financial research platform called Red Pulse. So I have experience in building a team of advisors for Red Pulse and also acting as an advisor to some of the projects that we've dealt with and worked with on the Ledger Capital side.
Great. Now we have another Jonathan, Jonathan Lee.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Lee. I'm based in Seoul. I'm the Chief Corporate Development Officer for Yello Digital Marketing Group. We're the #1 digital marketing ad tech group in Korea. We did a ICO called 6 Networks here in Bangkok. You might have seen our booth. And then I'm also acting as an advisor to 4 other projects. You may have heard of Exchange by Kochava, iCash, Hara from Indonesia, and then Musica from Korea.
Great. Okay. Lastly, we've got Keith over there at the end.
Hi guys, my name is Keith. I lead the research and strategy team at XSQ. So XSQ is a mining, investment, and advisory arm in Singapore. So basically, there's 3 functions.
Great. So before we start, actually, before we get down to the nitty-gritty, I want to kind of do something fun here real quick. It's still a little bit light in here. So on the count of 3, let's make a big round of applause and get some noise going so we can get some more people in here. All right, you guys ready? 1, 2, 3. Woo!
Yeah!
All right.
Let's give it up for the Beyond Blocks guys that organized such a beautiful event, right?
Cool. All right, so let's kick this off with, let's go back to the basics. What's the difference between board of directors and board of advisors? Let's go through that. Who wants to kick that off?
I can take that. I think basically it's liability. So board of advisors, they get what benefit they can out of the deal, but they are not liable to anything. They're not responsible for anything. And a board of directors is liable both on, in front of the investors and also legally. So yeah, in a lot of cases, especially in this space where we've seen scams, there is even, criminal liability for a board of directors. So it's very easy to be an advisor and distance yourself from that.
Right. I see. You guys have anything additional to add to that?
Well, I think, board of directors is also involved with making important business operational decisions. So you have to create it where you can efficiently make these important decisions. And also, I think, is related to liability, as he said, and because ICO projects, there aren't that many information out there, and there's no SEC filings or as of date today. So I think it's very important to have a strong board of directors that will bring credibility to the project.
Right. Okay. And we have, for my past companies and my current company, Zilla, we have informal advisors as well as mentors. But, I get asked quite a bit, actually, like, will you be my mentor? Is that like an advisor? Do we pay you? So what's the difference between advisors and mentors, in your words?
Sure. So also to touch upon the difference between board of advisors and board of directors, and agreed with what Alon and Jonathan Lee mentioned, but also adding to that, I think the board of directors is probably acting as advisors as well, but they have a certain additional degree of responsibility to think in the best interests of the shareholders, so the people that hold equity in that company, and by definition, they're the ones that are acting on behalf of them. So whatever's in the best interest of those equity holders is what those directors should actually be justifying and making decisions on behalf of. So in relation to mentorship, yeah, I do think that's certainly a form of advisorship to a company, but I consider mentorship to be more of a individual and personal sort of relationship that's being built between the founding team or perhaps one particular founder and somebody that's just been much more experienced in this space as an entrepreneur themselves or a technical expert.
Right.
And I think that's really important. As a fellow entrepreneur, and many of the people in this room I'm sure are also entrepreneurs, I do better. I'm a better business person. I am quicker to make decisions, not just based on my gut, but because I've been able to learn a lot of interesting things and lessons from people that have come before me. So mentorship, I think, is extremely important for any sort of startup.
Right. Yeah, going back to board of directors really quick, if you look at a case like Uber, for example, right, the CEO was ousted by the board of directors, and after making mistake after mistake, they kind of stepped in on behalf of the equity holders of the company and said, look, we have a responsibility to get rid of you. So whereas advisors don't have that power, right? They can basically give advice and help you out along with the business and make introductions, but that's about it. So how do you go about finding advisors for your company? Keith, if you can agree with that.
Well, I would say if your project, say, if you're doing an ICO in the blockchain space, say if you're a supply chain project, then you would want people in the supply chain industry to be part of your advisorship as well. But in that sense, if you're not well delved in the crypto space, then you might need some advisors that are well known in the crypto space as well to come on board as advisors. So in that sense, people ask as well, what do advisors actually do? Do they just make introductions? Do they just show you who the exchanges are? Tell you who the market makers are, the exchanges, the advisors? So in that sense, I'd say that's the difference between having advisors as crypto advisors and so-called non-crypto advisors. So you need both aspects of advisors onto your project.
Right.
I think projects should look at who brings them the most value. I have a general problem with the ICO model. I think there is a misalignment of interest, especially since you're creating, demand for a token and not. So the value of the product or service that you're going to provide is not increasing because there is scarcity of the product or service. It's increasing because there is a scarcity of the means of payment for it. Mm-hmm. And that's, in general, my problem with ICOs. And I think that model also allowed people to raise a lot of money without giving any equity, which allowed them to pay with that money for services, not advisory. So we see advisors that are PR, lawyers, economists, whatever, and that usually a company would pay for those services. And in the traditional startup world, it's very customary to have some sort of a deal with a startup where you don't take as much upfront and maybe save something for the success fee. But when the advisors get all of the benefit in advance, and then they can just dump it on the market and capitalize it without the project being successful, that's, for me, a huge misalignment of interest. So I think, getting back to the point of what you asked, projects should ask themselves, who brings me the most value, not in terms of services, but in terms of, reaching the goals that I want to deliver in terms of the product or service that I want to deliver. And of course, part of it is raising money. So if someone helps you raise money, that's part of it. And I think that's maybe the only place that the incentives and the interests are aligned.
Right. Okay. Jonathan, did you have anything to?
Sure, yeah. So I think there's one thing that I picked up on that you just mentioned, Alon, is the value that these advisors bring to the table. And in fact, I think that could change over time. You know, if you're a small startup, you've got 3 people, 4 people, number one, the type of advice that you need at that stage is probably very different than if you're a year in or 5 years in to your company. And also, the caliber of advisors that you can attract to your company is also going to evolve. It's also going to change over time. And so, you know, I think earlier stage, the type of advisors that I would, you know, personally be looking for a startup that I'm running would be those advisors that have gone through a startup experience before, for one. And then number 2, would stack my advisory board with people that have experience in my actual industry. You know, and I think that's a bit different than what we've seen to be the case in the ICO world, where a lot of the time the advisory board that you see on these white pages, in the white paper, so on and so forth, they're big names a lot of the time. You know, they're using star power because the main objective is to fundraise, not necessarily to help them build a better business.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think when it comes to ICOs, like, you need all the help you can get, right? Because now you're running a 24-hour global business and you're doing IR and fundraising, and you're working with the crypto world and the business world together. So my general advice is that is really get all the help you can. And the truth is, when in ICO, it's still the retail market that is heavily involved, and unfortunately, well, I wouldn't say unfortunately, but the retail market is not as sophisticated.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, there aren't that many things they can base their investment decisions on.
Right.
And so advisors do play a big role, in my opinion, still. But just from personal experience, it's always the best to have advisors that you have strong relationships with. So I would start from your personal network first, because they do add a lot more value and they do go a lot more out of the way to help the project. But that doesn't mean, in my opinion, it's not worth getting a big name, even though you don't have a very close relationship to, because it still does matter to the retail space.
So it's definitely, I mean, like the way I looked at it, like during our token sale, you have, the way I classified advisors was, you have these celebrity advisors who can basically help with the fundraise just with their name. Then you have like, you know, technical advisors who can help like on the blockchain tech and that sort of stuff. You have maybe legal advisors, so attorneys and those sorts. And then as well as like, you know, like financial advisors who can help you, you know, introduce you to investors and that sort of stuff. And of course, like business advisors that know that space that you're in, that can help you, you know, connect you with, you know, institutions and for potential collaborations and so on and so forth. But I think like that, for example, the celebrity advisors is somewhat unique to ICOs. Like, what do you guys think is the difference between like ICO or blockchain advisors versus real world typical startup advisors?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's exclusive to ICOs. I think a lot of startups, traditional startups, use star power. If you can harness, sometimes the star power is from the Silicon Valley VC, you know, space.
Right.
So if you can put Peter Thiel's name on your project, maybe it will help it. And of course, also people from, you know, professional sport. If you can get LeBron to invest in your startup, maybe it will raise a few more bucks. But I want to touch on what you said before about the, you know, the value that those people bring. And I think the stars, it's great. But once you put like legal advisors, but they don't do any legal work. They are just stars in the legal department. So it kind of gives false legitimacy to your project.
Right.
And for us, we have ultra high net worth individuals as clients. And a lot of times they ask us, do you have a project to recommend? So, and we do that for them many times, and we look at projects. And one of our criteria to decide if something is legit or not, we look at the advisory board, and we actually have a database of advisors and see who is advising in what projects, and looking and saying, okay, doesn't make sense. This guy is on 300 advisory boards. How much time does he contribute to each project?
Right.
That's also the question. So the star power will deliver value.
Right.
But what kind of value does that star lawyer gonna deliver?
Right.
The legitimacy, which is false, or is actually gonna do legal work?
Right. Right.
I would say, to add to that point, some advisors, what they do is actually called name drop. So in order to raise funds, people generally, it's a herd mentality. I think this was mentioned in the previous panels. So instead of just having advisors on, your project, you got to ask, what value are they actually providing? Is it just a name drop? Are they structuring your tokens? Are they structuring, how your equity, are you doing equity raise? Are you doing a token raise? Are you doing a convertible? So, on a personal basis, this is where I come in. I do the structuring for projects, whether it's, I don't want to go into detail, but of course, then there are also introductions as well that's being done. I guess investors also do that. If you have a stake in the company, then you generally want the project to succeed. So if you could get introductions this way, why would you need advisors in that sense? But at the same time, it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem, because if you have no advisors and you have no name on your project,
Right.
how are you going to get investors?
Right. Right.
So I guess some of these projects just end up paying for lip service
Right.
or name drops. And that's how the space is.
It's pretty typical. Yeah. I think it's interesting though, because of course they're in the startup world, the typical Silicon Valley, quote unquote, startup world. You'll have, rock star funds who are Sequoia, so on and so forth, and rock star investors, Peter Thiel and those types, who are investing in projects, and that gives the project the legitimacy. But in the blockchain space, obviously we have that too. There are, rock star investors, TLDR, you've got Kinetic, you've got Pantera, everyone, right? But I think the unique thing is like a McAfee, someone who we all know is batshit crazy, who's, may or may not have actually killed a man, and is like advising ICOs, and he's on 150,000 projects, and I think it's pretty unique to our industry. Why don't you guys speak a little bit to that?
I think the only thing more opportunistic than raising money through a scam ICO is actually benefiting from that scam ICO as a scam advisor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen a lot of those. Mm-hmm. People that are, in there, they can make the connections. And we have to remember, we're talking about a fairly small community.
Right.
The blockchain space is still very small.
Right.
It's very early on.
Right.
We are less than 2.5% of the people connected to the internet. Right? That's nothing in comparison to the scale of traditional VCs going out of California that you mentioned. So those people are very influential in a very small community that the value of their holdings grew exponentially in the last 2 years, which made them able to invest that. And for me, it's kind of like hedging, because if your Ether went really up,
right,
you just distribute it between different ICOs, you kind of hedge it. Maybe.
Right.
And then you flip those coins again and dump them. So yeah, if that's the whole point of it, you mentioned some names that, done things that are in the traditional world exchanges would be considered market manipulation. And that's a criminal offense. They might go to jail for that, or for murdering someone. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, we have, I could list off a bunch of names, which I'm not going to do, but like, we have legit celebrity, advisors like Vitalik, right? Or like Da Hongfei, right? And how actually, yeah, that's a good one. How did he help your project out? Because for Red Pulse, he was one of your advisors, and you guys, you used the Neo blockchain.
That's right. So in this case, Da Hongfei, he was helpful not just in putting his name on our project and white paper. He literally was there in a lot of our meetings in developing the use case the business concept and how the Neo technology actually integrates with that. And so he really was acting as a true contributor to our project. And of course, it doesn't hurt that his name is a big name in the industry,
Sure.
right? So if you have alignment there between actual contribution of insights, of advice, and also having this celebrity level name, then that's great. But I think that when there is misalignment, when it is just a name that you're attaching to your project, that's a business decision. I'm not necessarily going to be as critical of that because that may allow you to raise a lot more than otherwise. But I think it's also important to keep your eye on the long game, because if you do choose someone that is rather controversial, more so than just being a celebrity, but very controversial, that's going to be attached to your brand and reputation for a long while yet.
Right.
And if you are really serious about building a platform and a company, perhaps surrounding that platform, that is going to last for a decade, for 100 years even perhaps, you don't want to start off on the wrong foot, having this controversial, somewhat crazy figure, as part of your board of advisors, because how are you going to work with other corporates, other foundations, other organizations in the future if you have that sort of stigma attached to you?
Right.
So one of the things that we feel at Ledger Capital as well as Red Pulse is that your reputation and your integrity are paramount. And it takes a lifetime, it takes an entire career to build up. It only takes one mistake to destroy. And we typically just don't buy into the idea of just putting a name there just for the name.
Right. Right.
I completely agree. By the way, I want to just say that's a two-way street, though. So as an advisor, you also have that reputational risk putting your name on a project.
That's right.
And I think that is even more important because, like I said, we have that database of those scam advisors criteria that we try to filter good or bad projects. But we also have the good list, the white list, So, for example, if I'm introduced to a project by the guys in X Squared, which we have a close relationship with, I know that's someone I can trust. I know that at least they vetted them. I'm still going to do my own due diligence for my clients, but I know that it passed one level of vetting, and I know that that brand name gives me some sort of comfort that I can then relate to my clients. And I think it's very important. Like you said, I think for us, not doing advisory was a big part of it because that was a huge opportunity. The last year, a lot of money has been made in advisory, and we've decided strategically not to go into it because of the reputational risk, and because we sit in the seam between both sides, the investors putting in the money, and the projects which we provide services to. Like ICO is a classic client for me for liquidity, custody, enterprise wallet, you name it, asset management, treasury management. So I'm on both sides, and I just want to stay impartial and objective and not have any reputational risk.
Right, right. So what's like the time commitment that you can expect advisors to put into your project?
Well, I think for me personally, so when you're doing an ICO, there's the crypto side where, white paper,
Right.
Sales structure and strategy.
Right.
And you need the right advisors to help you out with that. And the market's changing so much, so it does help to have advisors. And it's really tough to just study it from documents
Right.
and websites and benchmark other projects. So that's very important. And then I think once the ICO is done, you have to think about go-to-market and adoption
Right.
and really enterprise partnerships for a lot of the consumer-facing projects.
Right.
And you need the right advisors who have extensive, I think, business skills, because in a way, doing an ICO is tougher than building a #1 business platform, because you're going beyond that, right? And so definitely, I think, you do need the traditional business skills, but on top of that, you got to be able to convince the enterprises and the market that this blockchain technology is relevant and is worthwhile utilizing.
Right, right.
So for me, I play a lot of part in kind of bridging the ICO side and then the traditional business side, helping out. And really, it's just providing a lot of network. I'm based in Seoul, and a lot of the projects are very interested in finding partnerships in Korea, so I lay the bridges. But for me, like I've found that actually attending all the meetings physically is very helpful. It makes a big difference compared to just creating a group chat. So in that sense, if I'm laying out these major corporation partnerships, it does become very time consuming. Like a lot of the times I'm driving the project leaders or the team around town, and literally it would take pretty much all of my time while they're in Korea.
Right, wow.
So it can be time consuming if you decide to commit it.
Right,
commit your
right.
time, yeah.
This is something I haven't really, people have asked me many times, but I haven't really heard it addressed, frankly, but how much do advisors cost? So Keith, if you could add a little bit to that, like what are the typical fees that advisors charge, or how much are they offered?
I mean, in this space, a lot of advisors try to profit maximize. They can charge anywhere from, I don't know, $1 million over dollars. They're asking for success rate of, I don't know, 10%, 15% of your tokens. And that is
30%.
insane, right?
Ridiculous.
Considering if you're raising 100 mil, and 15%, that's like 15 mil. So, I mean, there are some all-star, advisors out there that do that. For us, we don't do that. If you want to know how much we charge, we can speak privately.
Yeah, you said 30%.
No, I've known of advisory teams that charge 30%, and those were not the best legit projects or advisors, but they raised a lot of money, and they were, very opportunistic. They made money, and it's good. I don't know. I'm not judging anyone. I think if I connected it to the question you asked before about the time you put inside, I think it's not necessarily a matter of time. It's also a matter of time, but it's mostly a matter of execution and what kind of deliverables that advisory can give you.
Right.
And I've known projects, so we give services to projects. We don't do advisory, but we advise them a lot, and we don't charge anything. So basically, we'll charge for the service, but advisory is not part of it. So we do that for free on the side. And there are countless projects that we have helped with banking. So solutions for crypto-friendly bank account, liquidation of their positions, giving them hedging strategies, even if we're not giving them the service, which we would do, lovingly. But if they don't want it, we will still advise them how to do it, if they want to do it on themselves.
So if you don't offer traditional advising services, as a service, do you recommend other advisors, or are you linking? Because you do agree that it's pretty important for a company to...
Well, I guess it depends on what value that advisor should give. I think, like I said in the beginning, if it's a service that you can pay for, it's going to also be more cost-effective if you actually pay for your legal fees.
Right.
If you really believe in your token, if you really believe in your equity, or it doesn't matter if it's your utility, then the long term, it's going to be worth a lot more than what you just paid, right? And so if you're really bullish on your own project, any service that you can pay for it.
Right.
And the advisor should be for the people helping you raise those funds.
Right.
And the people that are actually core to the activity that you're doing. So if it's the business that you're in, and if it's the blockchain development.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I've actually advised a couple of projects myself, and it was, I don't know how your experience is, but it's awkward actually, like for when I was asked, it's like being asked out on a date almost, and people are dancing around the question, but anyways, when I became their advisor, it actually was a lot more time consuming than I thought it was going to be. And I was happy to commit my time because there were projects that I liked and I really believed in and wanted to participate in myself, and thought that I could really actually bring a lot of value in introductions and so on and so forth. I find the process fascinating, to be honest with you, but I try to advise companies on how to actually bring on advisors, but the blockchain space changes so quickly.
Right.
It's kind of, right, there's so many different ways to do it. And, but I think last year we had Paris Hilton, we had Floyd Mayweather. But the thing is, I laugh too, but those projects actually raise a lot of money. So I go back and forth on whether or not I think that's a valid way to do it or not. So I think if we could speak on that a little bit.
Sure, yeah. And just quickly to go back to your preceding question on how much does an advisor cost or should an advisor cost, I think that's a tough question to answer because you have to look at the situation. And the 30% figure sounds pretty outrageous. And at the same time, I think
How about
it is
30 plus 30?
30 plus 30, right? Yeah, even
Not
bigger
joking.
number. Yeah. So I think what's also important to consider is that in the traditional venture cap world, advisors oftentimes do get some sort of remuneration, whether that's some small salary from the company itself. More likely for an early stage, it's 1% perhaps of equity. That's actually quite commonplace. So to have some amount of compensation is not unheard of. In fact, it's industry practice. So to your question just now, Abasa, on whether or not this is a practice of finding these stars and using their star power, I think that question could be posed not just to the blockchain space, but to the overall fundraising space,
Sure.
right? And one of the panels that I was on earlier today, we had talked about convergence of financial markets, and this is part of it. I think that there's going to be convergence in how people go about fundraising, how people go about pitching themselves and their companies, and how people go about conducting due diligence before they make an investment. Because right now, most of that in the blockchain space is the complete watered down version of what we have in the traditional finance space. But that's soon to change. In fact, it's already changing.
Absolutely. I agree.
So I think, going back to just the previous question is probably, they want to hear a straight answer on how much
Sure.
they should pay for advice. I think that depends on a lot of, at what point of the project they come in. Like
Right.
if they're helping this incubating, literally helping them write the white paper, structuring the token sales and strategy and providing all the network. I mean, I think, you can pay up to 30% or even more. I think generally, 10 to 15%
Right.
sounds more reasonable, but at the end of the day, if the project is not successful and there's no utility, then this
Right.
token means nothing.
Right.
And so a lot of times I just say don't, fight over
Right. Yeah.
tiny percentages. And I usually just tell our companies, if they have value, just
Right.
give it to them.
Right.
I think a short answer to how much an advisor should cost is that the advisor should believe that they can provide more value to the project than what the project's paying for.
It's well said.
Yeah.
So that's key. Right?
Well said.
So if you have the personal relationship to the advisor, you will know how much that person has value. I think
Right.
generally these days a lot of the projects, 0.5 up to 1.5%.
Right.
That's about the rate that they pay out the advisors these days.
Right. Right.
Assuming they have decent amount of contribution and value. Now, going back to the Paris Hilton question, I think, if the project is say an influencer-related project, I think it might be worth having a Paris Hilton. But if it's a protocol, then no point in having Paris
Right,
Hilton. So
right, that's true.
I think it depends on what vertical, what industry it's hitting.
I would like to touch on what Jonathan here said, and he said, in traditional world, it's not uncommon for advisors or even service providers to get some sort of a success fee in equity, and I think that's the key difference, where equity is a success fee that is paid when that equity is worth more. And that equity is going to be worth more when the company is doing better, when the product is successful, when they get traction and engagement and users or whatever the key performance index for that industry is. And with tokens, a lot of the times, half of the advisor is not even advising. The operation of that advisor is basically being a hedge fund that needs to actually work on how to maximize the value of dumping or selling or market making those tokens. And they can actually get the success fee a lot faster than even the project or anybody else. And usually that's, in my mind, a huge misalignment of interests that is just, unconstructive to the whole space. And we all want to see, we are all long crypto, we are all long blockchain, probably, because we are here.
Right.
But we all want to see mass adoption. In order for that to happen, in my mind, we need to grow up a bit as an industry, be more ethical, be more scrupulous, and have a bit more morals, and then that's it. Because we will find a way to align the interest. We will find the right models. We just need to want to do that and not maximize the short-term profit.
Right.
That's a very good point. And it sounds as if there's a pretty major timing issue there in terms of liquidity, because when you're holding equity, just by nature of holding equity in a startup company, there's not going to be a liquidity event for quite some time.
That's
in
true.
fact, it may never come unless the company actually is quite successful in expanding, demonstrating value in the marketplace. And that's actually what the advisor is for. That's
Exactly.
what they're there to do.
Exactly.
And the problem with giving them the tokens that's immediately liquid is that they may not necessarily follow through with their responsibility. And maybe that's as simple as building in some sort of lockup period for those type of tokens.
Completely agree.
And I think a lot of the regulators are looking at that as a means to rein in some of the bad behavior that's been taking place in the space.
Absolutely. I think the question is also about a lot of projects come to, like I said, we don't do advisory, but we give a lot of advice. And a lot of projects ask me, what do you think about lockup periods and bonuses?
Right.
These are the two things. And I tell them, lockup, they told me, what do you think in terms of timing on the lockup? 2 years, 1.5, 1 year, 6 months? I told them, how about don't give it a time frame, just say it's locked up until the company is profitable. And then the alignment of the interests are perfect.
That's actually, it's a great idea. Yeah, it's a good idea. I mean,
I don't know how many more advisors you will see then.
right, right, yeah. But the thing is, the goal sometimes isn't profitability. If it's a protocol or something like that, right? The goal is really to get
Usability then.
right. It's to get it out.
Scalability as well.
Yeah, scalability. Yeah. Well, Ethereum might never achieve that, so advisors might never get paid. I think one of the difficult things is approaching potential advisors, and I led into that earlier, but. How do you make the ask? How do you ask, look, hey, become my advisor? Or how do you approach that situation? It's quite tricky.
You want to take this, Keith?
I'll take it. Sure. So for X Square, we don't actually take on all projects. We vet through the projects. Generally, we like to select projects that have legit businesses behind them, profit-making businesses that would like to do what they call a reverse ICO in that sense. Of course, there are protocol layers, there are decentralized solutions out there that not necessarily are businesses, they're foundations. We look at that as well. But for so-called DApps or projects that want to do a reverse ICO, we have to look at their credibility. If they're profit-making, a lot of these due diligence processes before we actually select the project itself. That's how we look at stuff.
But do you go to them and say, hey, we like your project, we would like to advise you, or do they come to you and say, hey, what would it take for you to be our advisor?
We do have quite a bit of projects that come to us. We don't accept all of them. So in that sense, we're actually quite picky. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's both ways. Like I was the director for WPP Korea, and so natural, and then my current role, our company being the #1 digital marketing ad tech company, naturally I get practically most of the digital marketing related projects coming asking for to become on as an advisor, and literally probably I've gone through 30 and rejected most of them because most of these projects are conceptually great, but like just being an industry expert, realistically it'll be very difficult.
Right.
But Exchange by Kochava, that's a project that I actually met this CEO, and then I told him, I think there's a value add I could add, and I'd love to, help you guys. And there are other cases where the projects would come and ask, and generally, if there's a value add I could do, and if I like the team, I would definitely consider it. Yeah.
Right.
But the easy answer is take them out, show them a good time, have a fun night, and then get close
While
to
they're
them.
drunk.
Yeah, build a relationship.
Right.
You have to have a relationship before
Right.
anything else. Yeah.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
I guess just to add on, one of the ways that usually happens is that when projects come to us for investments, when we ask certain questions, like
Right.
how do you manage your token velocity? What is your crypto economics? Okay, you're profit making, you're launching a token, you want to sell us your token, but net income doesn't flow into tokens, it flows into equity.
Right.
So what's the value of your token?
Right.
How do you control, is there a staking feature, is there a burn feature, what is it based on? Right? So we ask all these questions and they'll be like, okay, wait, we haven't thought about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then that forms the relationship, and then we move on from there.
Right.
I think that's the key job of an advisor, to ask those projects the questions that they didn't even think about. And for us, we see a lot of those projects coming early on for several reasons. One of them, they think about the future services that they might need. Also, our connection to high net worth individuals and funds. And probably most importantly because of our founder, which is the biggest angel investors one of the biggest angel investors in Israel, and they think that that is a gateway to get to him, which might be true. I couldn't say, but the point is they come to us sometimes so unprepared.
Right.
In terms of they have an amazing idea,
Right.
but there are so many missing pieces, and we help with whatever we can. And I think but the biggest help initially is asking them the questions, like what Keith just said.
Right. Yeah, I noticed, when I speak, we have over 300 ICOs on our platform, and, we do as much as we can to vet them. A lot of times, when I'm involved in that process, I ask go-to-market strategy, questions, and usually, like if the technology is great, everything's great, but the minute you really get into that, a lot of times they fall down. And I think it's a shame because that's one of the things that's going to drive adoption in this space. But as an advisor, I think if we could offer more in terms of that, I think it would do a lot to kind of foster.
Recently there was a project where I don't have any equity, not part of the team, just literally was an advisor. But it was an early stage project, and it was decentralizing existing distribution chain, which is great conceptually,
Sure.
but in reality, it's so difficult and
Right.
it's going to take forever. So I literally said, how about we consider just scrapping this? And I have actually a better idea.
Wow.
Why don't you consider this?
Right.
And the whole team liked it, and they've just scrapped the project, and they're building this new one, which is getting really good traction.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So if there's a trust, and
Right.
then things like that happen as well.
Wow, yeah, you're a hell of an advisor. Yeah. Great. Before we wrap things up, or if we have questions in the audience, you guys can, all right, go right ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone have ICO advisory, trading, and research under one roof?
ICO advising and trading under one roof. So
Three things: ICO advisory, research, and trading. If any one of you guys have under one roof, within one company.
So we have all of that, but we don't charge for the advisory. So we do
Sorry?
trading. So we have research, we have trading, we give advice, but we don't charge for the advisory.
Okay, then the question for you: do you have Chinese walls between advisory and research and trading? If not, do you think you will need those?
No, we don't have Chinese walls because we don't charge for the advisory. Because I don't have any, our interests are aligned. So I don't have any, I'm trying to be impartial and objective, and I can do that by not getting any money from the ICO, the project. I'm just getting money for the services that I provide. and not in a token, not in a percentage of the success fee. It's nothing like that. We just give them the advice because we believe in a project and we want to see it grow, and we're passionate about it, and we think it will drive some sort of mass adoption in the market. And on the other side, we charge for the services that we, like for the trading. If I'm doing an OTC trade for that, client, then obviously I will gonna charge something. And the research that we do, we sell it. So again, we sell the research, and clients are paying for that.
So advisory services are free, right?
Yes, that's right. It's not advisory services, so it's just a byproduct of the services that we give.
If you had to advise on M&A, if, for example, one ICO project wants to acquire another one, would you charge for that?
I will not charge for that, and I would recommend against it, because they did not raise money to buy a different company, right? They raised money.
I'm not asking about your advice, whether to do it. If they
I understand.
came to you for advice.
I will tell them don't do it, and I will not charge for saying don't do it.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're out of time. They're going to kick us off the stage and kick my ass if we don't stop now. So, yeah, I'd like to thank the panelists. This was great. Thank you guys, and thank you guys, the audience. Let's continue the conversation out there. We've got one more talk coming up, and so you guys look forward to that.
Great.
And I look forward
Let's
to
thank the Beyond Blocks guys.
And thank you to
Yeah,
Beyond
thank
Blocks
you.
Yeah.
for another great
Thank
event.
you very much for having us.